When our core wounds meet the physical world, it offers us the opportunity to heal from the trauma and the emotional wear and tear we have endured in this lifetime. How many core wounds are there to heal? In this podcast series, we will talk about them all, healing the emotional core wounding, including the mother wound, the primal wound, so we can walk in our medicine to be the healers that we all are. Join podcast host, confidence coach Susan Axelrod with her very special guest, Kornelia Stephanie. This podcast is one for the ages, living beyond the core wounds. Hello, friends. Welcome to this part 2 episode on the core wound of shame. I hope that you listened to the part 1 episode. Such important conversation, such a huge opportunity to do the deep inner work. I do this work myself. I know what it takes. And I also know what happens when you learn this tool of emotional processing and how it can make a difference. As a reminder, this conversation is based largely on my dear friend's book, Peace, the Flip Side to Anger by Kornelia Stephanie. I wanted to just share a quick quote from the book for you to get our conversation started for today. In chapter 8, which is titled Emotional Healing and Self-Regulation, she writes, "To best clear these core wounds, they have to be felt and released out of your emotional body. These wounds can be very beneficial to feel, but it will pass. Emotion is an energy, and once it is felt and released, it moves through, creating space for more vitality and light to enter. Feeling it is healing it." And I want to tell you, friends, as you've heard me say before on this podcast, I am experiencing this myself, doing this work with Kornelia. I cannot say how true it is and how real it is to be going through this process of emotional clearing, emotional processing. Kornelia, hello. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Susan, for again having me on this podcast series, again asking for this work to be brought out so that we can share it with others that need this information, that want this information, that want to heal. I love it, first of all, when you laugh, and when you have that beautiful laugh, and the quote is, "Feeling it is healing it." It's very simple. It's very simple. Feeling it is healing it. The pain, it's painful. It's painful to feel some of our core wounding. It is painful to sit with uncomfortable emotions. It's painful when our trauma from the past is here. Why? So that we can, in this moment, heal from the past. That's really what it is healing the trauma from the past, not so that we can continue on this same cycle over and over and over again, but that we can fully release and let go and live beyond the trauma that we were born into in this life. So there are no victims here. We're all empowered creators, and we're here to have the realization, what is this about for me? What is this showing me? What am I releasing and letting go of? What is my inner child yearning here? What is the wound? What is it about? And sitting with it and feeling it. And the beautiful thing about sitting with an energy, to be in the energy of shame, when we're feeling ashamed, to claim our full light, to claim our full power, our individual power, to claim our full birthright, that we came here to live and experience our true magnificence in this physical body on this planet. We came here for this. And that we came here to heal from the past. That's why we came. But why is it then that we feel so bad sometimes? And that's because maybe we weren't ready until now. Maybe we weren't ready until now to actually really do this whole process, because I think you talked about it in your opening statement, healing the shadow, sitting with the shadow, being with the shadow parts of ourselves is challenging. And that's actually where the gold lies, right?
I mean, don't I know it? I just want to say again, in response to what you just said, what the truth is for our listeners and our viewers is this: emotion is an energy. Once it is felt and released, it moves through, creating space for more vitality and light to enter. And that's what we're doing here. That's why we're having this conversation. You said shame it's hard, it's dense. This is such a big one. They all feel so big, actually, but shame, it's so dense. In our last episode, you described it as a tar-like substance. It's tar-like. And I wrote down, as you know, I take notes while we're talking, and I wrote down, not claiming power, not being in our full power, not acknowledging our birthright. And then I wrote down, are we ready to sit in that pain? And I just want to say, from personal experience of this process, that if you can get yourself ready, that you will be able to create the light and opportunity on the other side of it.
Yeah, I think this is such an important time. It just so happens right now, when the audience is listening to this, is that right now in the astrology, we have the sun squaring Pluto, or Pluto squaring the sun. But this is not about the astrology, because this is about at any point in time when you're really ready to claim your own individual power. Because again, Pluto is the god of the underworld, and really Pluto is going to go to the bottom of the ocean and bring up what is underneath there that's been hidden, so that you can really bring it up to the surface and release it and let it go, so that you can really claim your power in it. And now the sun is our life force. If we don't have the sun, if we don't have the sun, we're not motivated, we're not inspired, we're not living. The sun is our life force energy. So now imagine the god of the underworld, Pluto, squaring the sun right now in this partial solar eclipse in Aries right now that we have. This is what's happening. It's the perfect time for any person right now that is dealing with powerlessness issues, that is dealing with shame to claim your power, that is feeling like you want to hide in the shadow and that you don't want to come out of your cave because you feel like you're never going to move beyond this. This is the perfect time to use this time for liberation, for healing, for you to claim your power, for you to claim your birthright, for you to claim your shine, for you to be like the sun. In the square, it's the perfect time to do it.
And what I want to say is, it's the perfect time to do this. But whenever you are listening to this podcast discussion or viewing this video, whenever it is, then what's happening now is that you're being reminded by this conversation about powerlessness, about Pluto with the underworld, the things that are going on under the surface, and the sun being the life force. This is what you're hearing today, which is exactly intended. So Kornelia, when you talk about the underworld, you talked about, or maybe you and I in the green room were talking about the cave, feeling like you're in a cave. Shame, comes over you, and it just comes down in you, and it grabs onto you and holds you and like brings you down in that dense energy. And so I love that you're, calling in the sun, the life force, to begin to help you see the light.
Yeah. And also to integrate the shadow, because again, the shadow is not to be judged. The shadow is not to be made bad. The shadow is not to be made wrong. The shadow is where the gold is. The shadow is where God is. The shadow is where the light will. You're going to be integrating and accepting the shadow. That's the part. It's like when we're in the cave and we're looking at the skeletons in the closet. What are we feeling shadowed about? What are we feeling embarrassed about? What are we feeling ashamed about? We've all done things in our lives that we're not proud of. We've all done things, not just in this life, but in other lives too. So there may be a lot that's underneath that surface that we're not feeling good about, and that we want to bring into integration and full acceptance, the same way that the light will do for us, the same way that God, the source, does for us, is to be in full acceptance over the things that we don't really feel that good about. When we were unconscious, when we've done things that, we don't feel good about. So those are the skeletons I'm talking about. And I'm talking about how can we shine our light, shine our inner sun at a time when we have all of this shadow stuff to look at, or the skeletons to look at. My question to you, Susan, is why are people afraid to shine their light?
Mm. You know, one answer that comes to me immediately from my own work in coaching is that we're taught not to, Cornelia. It's actually taken away from us with intention, right? Be quiet, sit down, don't brag, don't boast. And so in some ways, we're reluctant to because it's taken away from us. In other ways, there's two aspects. One is the overt, I call this above the surface, and one is the, under the surface, which is a little bit more covert. And so in the shame, when you were saying, what are you feeling ashamed of? What are you feeling shame about? You asked those questions for us to consider. And I want to invite our listeners to ask those questions. One of the things might be something you did, right? You said, we've all done something that we're ashamed of. One thing might be something that you did. But Cornelia, as I've learned from you also, another thing is it may be something that was done to you. This is the core wounding, that the ocean that you swam in, perhaps having nothing really to do with what you did. So let me bring this together back to your question, Cornelia, and say, why are we reluctant to shine the light? We may not even know the answer to that, Cornelia, because if we're acting in such a way from something that was the ocean we swam in, that was done to us, like you shared with us many times in our conversations, stuff with your mother or your upbringing. In the last episode, you talked about not having money, I think, or something, feeling ashamed of that.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with you. That would be an example. Do you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah. Or even when you're triggered emotionally by, something that you may not even know what the trigger is, but it's certainly bringing up feelings of powerlessness in you, right? It's bringing up that. And during that time, when you're feeling powerless, when you're feeling victimized, when you're feeling like a victim, when you're not feeling like you can pick up that phone or stand on that, make that call or claim that job because, someone else is in line to be chosen over you or something like that, right? That it triggers those feelings. But it is during those exact times that's where the healing can happen. That is where the realization can be had, because it's happening. The trigger is happening for us so that we can feel the uncomfortableness, and that we can feel to heal what it was like to be looked over, to not be acknowledged, to not be appreciated, to not be held high, to not be chosen. And we're looking, of course, always on the outside, like, will you choose me? Will you acknowledge me? Will you see me? But that question needs to be asked of the self to the self. Do you acknowledge me? Do you see me? Do you feel me? Do you see this? Will you choose me today? Will you shine my light now? Will you, so that whole situation, it's always going to come back to you being liberated from a prison that you've kept yourself in until now.
I mean, this is ridiculous. It's so good. It's just like ridiculous. So I wrote down self to self, colon. Do you see me? Do you feel me? Do you acknowledge me? This is the processing, friends. This is the processing, self to self, sitting with yourself, sitting in it, as Kornelia says to me, sit in it. And then asking yourself the questions, answering self to self, and allowing yourself to rise. This is liberating, Kornelia. It's amazing.
Yeah. And so that's why, I'm always bringing it back to us as an individual, you as an individual, because you're the only person that can deem yourself worthy, that can claim your light, that can release and let go. Because if you are looking outside of yourself, you're always going to be looking for that approval. You're always going to be looking for that permission. You're always going to be looking for that savior. Save me from this. You're always going to be looking outside when the savior's already here. I can't wait for that next podcast, which we're doing next, which is going to be great. But the savior is already here in you. And I think that a lot of times, like, people just don't realize that it really is working with yourself, and understanding that really that what's required of you is just for you to be honest.
Well, one of the reasons for that is, Kornelia, because we're taught, again, from a young age to be anti-self.
Yeah.
That is what we're taught, Kornelia. We have to say the truth.
Yeah.
We're taught to be anti-self because it's selfish, it's bragging, it's boasting.
Yeah. And I think that part of that too is that's been part of the Piscean age of the sacrificial lamb, of taking care of your neighbor before you take care of yourself. It's the self needs to be included in the equation. And I think that is the recent movement, self-love movement over the last decade, maybe 2 decades of, the love for self, including the self, loving the self, having the most amazing, juicy relationship with the self, and then bringing that self to everything you relate with, because you're fully full, you're complete, you're whole. And, because you that's what I mean by loving yourself free.
Yes. And I think about our topic today of shame, and connected to shame is actually self-loathing. I think connected to shame is self-loathing. If shame is the core wound, then we're ashamed. We feel shame. And maybe we could identify, if we're really paying attention, friends, and really listening to this conversation, and you really want to live beyond your emotional core wounds, then you ask yourself these questions. And underlying shame, or shame creates self-loathing. So if I don't know what Kornelia means by self-love, which was me, Kornelia, okay, it's been a few decades that I've been on my journey because I'm old now, but I can tell you at 40 years old, I've made fun of people who talked about self-love. I'm putting in quotation marks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think having, defining what it means for you is an important process to your healing. I think that's really good. Like self-loathing, like keeping yourself down, shooting on yourself, shaming on yourself. We talked about it in the last episode, that you can make a declaration right now that from this moment forward that you refuse to say these words. Shame on you. Shame on me. That you refuse to use that language in your dialogue, because why in the world would you want to put shame on anyone, including your enemies? Anyone, no one. Why would you want to do that? So basically, replace it with shine on you, something like that. But not to use that kind of language in, because again, is that doing harm to another? Yes, it is. It's doing harm. Why? Because your energy is so powerful. And instead of sending love, what you're sending is shame. And even though when people go, oh, that's a joke, I don't think it's funny.
Not funny.
I don't think that's funny. So being aware of the language we use, again, with the language we have towards ourselves, shame on me. People say it so unconsciously, they're not even aware of it, right? And it's like, no, there's no need to say shame on me. We don't want shame on you. We want shine on you. That is what we want. That is what we want. That's what's going to help the world heal, when you're shining. I really want to highlight that you are God's children. We are God's children. We are in the image and in the likeness of source energy, reflecting the light. So why would we hold that light back from shining? Why would we hold ourselves back from shining that light out of shame for whatever reason, is there? And this is the perfect opportunity right now. Use this time period to release that old energy, to eclipse it out of your life, to release it and let it go, and start living in a new vibration. And that is shame-free, shine on, right?
Shine on. So, Kornelia, shame, the core wound of shame, which we said could be overt because of something I did, could be said something I knowingly did, I did knowingly, whether or not there was an intentionality to do something wrong. More often, or possibly, probably, it's more like, oh, something happened and it didn't go right, it went badly, and now I'm ashamed of it. We're now in the overt, the conscious, versus what I call below the surface, the covert, maybe subconscious, or perhaps pseudo-conscious, which is what I would call something that was done to me. Then what we're talking about now, Kornelia is reminding us that the opposite of shame, right? In our core wounds, we're going from shame to shine. And we ask ourselves, what does it take to move from shame to shine? I suggested the idea that self-loathing might be an indicator. Kornelia just reminded us, it's no joke. Words are not a joke. There's no, you don't laugh, oh, it's just a joke. No, words have meaning, very deep meaning. And so I want to really hit on this. Kornelia teaches us, about the spiral that we're walking in. You had to say it to me a lot of times, Kornelia. So I'm inviting people again, play these episodes again and again, like I am for myself, to grow. The spiral we're walking in, the shame spiral, the shame.
You know why this is so important, what you're saying about the spiral, is because we're giving birth to ourselves in the new. We're birthing ourselves. And in our birthing of ourselves, and in birthing of our new earth, in birthing of our new beginnings, there is no shame that is needed here. That's again, this is the reason why we titled this series Living Beyond the Core Wounds. This is intentional. This is masterful. This is on purpose. That once these wounds are healed, I promise you that they will no longer receive agency and energy from you, because you've been fully present fully consciously released it. And so that's why I can tell you, heaven on earth, peace on earth, each person, one heart, one moment, now at a time, is all happening because of the choices that we make in this now moment. So, these wounds that we've talked about, from unworthiness to abandonment to betrayal to what else did we talk about? Shame. All
Mother.
those, and the mother wound, all those core wounds. These are all wounds that we came in this lifetime to heal and release and be done. And now, in our born again state of consciousness, of awareness, of higher ways of living and being, what's happening over here? We're not going to be telling the story about betrayal, abandonment, because we're not betraying the self. We're not abandoning the self. We're not holding to stay in a low self-worth. It all begins at home. Peace is an inside job. Love is an inside job. Everything that you're looking for outside first has to be experienced from within.
Breathe. So I want to say a few things, Kornelia. First of all, I want to say again, I know I'm repeating. I'm sorry, my kids hate it when I repeat, but I'm repeating to grab our listeners to be in the consciousness of now. And that is what Kornelia is teaching us, is something I didn't believe. I didn't realize. I had been on a long journey already before I knew Kornelia, but I hadn't thought about it in this way, which is, once it's felt, and you can release it. Take your hands, friends, listeners, viewers, take your hands, open it up, release. And then what? You create space for more vitality and light to enter.
And then when you're walking, once you've released it in the old spiral of where abandonment, betrayal, unworthiness, shame, the core wounding, the mother wound, all used to be narratives, you're now walking in a new spiral in your universe that you are creating. You're walking a new spiral. And there's vulnerability. There's uncertainty. There's uncomfortableness. There's all of those feelings, because so much of you is present today that that is absolutely necessary to be there, to be so, if you will, vulnerable, to be so open, to be so out there, that you're walking that new spiral. And it's going to take a little while to walk that first walk around in the spiral of all the things, of living your life in trust, of living your life feeling safe and secure, of living your life worthy, knowing that you receive the blessings that you're creating daily with the choices that you're making. So there's so much, it's not easy. We talked about this, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ, it's not easy.
I know it's not easy, but it's so good. So I just want to say again, this is where we keep it real. This is, people say to you and to me, you're the real deal, because it's not easy. It's not easy to be in the new. The trust is the opposite of betrayal. Feeling safe and secure, the opposite of abandonment. Worthiness, the opposite of unworthiness. Shining, the opposite of shame. It's not easy to just simply move from there to there, which is why there's this process in peace and the idea of this spiral. I did want to bring up a point that I think is extremely relevant today, and actually for all time. And that is addiction, Kornelia. Addiction. I'm bringing it up in this particular episode because underlying addiction, which is just pervasively prevalent in our society today, not just addiction to alcohol and drugs, also addiction to alcohol and drugs, but other forms of addiction also. We have porn addiction now, we have phone addiction, we surely have sugar addiction, which is extremely damaging. Underlying addiction or embedded in addiction is shame. And it was like I was getting some energy, if the opposite of shame is shine, if you're in a behavior of this sort, Kornelia, it's really hard to go from there to there. But it's possible. I might say that I don't know that I would say in addiction to a type A lifestyle, but I was certainly in a type A lifestyle. And I worked, with it and with it and through it and through it and through it and through it to want to be in a different way of being. And now there are people who know me who are like, you were a type A.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. I'm glad you brought that up. The whole addiction piece, it can be overwhelming, that you feel so embarrassed and so ashamed about your addiction and you don't know where to begin with the shine. Well, first of all, that would be a good time to say, I'm ready to release this addiction. I'm ready to be done with it. It will, that saying, one day at a time, one moment at a time. That would be the thing. And then I would use, if that was me that had this addiction, I would, again, use the process of emotional processing. What was I covering up before? Why was I using the addiction? Really, what was I numbing up? What was too much for me to feel, to heal? What was this addiction about? Why was I using this distraction? Why was I going to, do these gaming and do all this porn addiction or whatever the addiction is? You're talking to a former addict here. So, why was I doing all of that? What's underneath all of that, right? Find a good mentor, find a good coach. Susan's a great coach. You can definitely message me for doing releasing work and clearing work when it comes to addiction work, but also the core wounding. But you just get to decide that I want to be free of this. I want to be done. I don't want to play this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And I promise you, the universe will send you all the right resources. Even right now, this is a resource. Even right now, this is a tool for you to use so that you can be free, that you can really be who it is that you came here to be, your authentic self, shining in full self acceptance, in full adoration, in full remembrance of the truth of who you are.
Oh, amen. And I want to say, when Kornelia says this, she is qualified because she did leave addiction behind. When Kornelia Stephanie says to us, you can be free, she is qualified to say that statement. And again, we come back to nobody's saying anything is so easy.
Oh,
But we, Kornelia and I, we're here with you today. We are doing the work. We're providing the resource based on the inner work in different ways that we have done ourselves. And so I really do agree that regarding addiction, this is so huge. Shame is so connected to addiction.
at the root core of addiction, I think I talked about that in my book. I'm not sure, but I think I did. But in the root core of addiction, at the root core of addiction is lack of self-love. Is a lack of self-love. So everyone in the world, all the things that we're addicted to, people that have these addictions, that there is a lack of self-love, because once you release the addiction, you know what you're going to put in its place? Self-love. That's what you're going to put in its place. You're going to put self-love in that place. You're going to put love in there, and love is going to heal it. The self-love that you're going to put in there instead of the addiction. You're not going to keep going with that behavior, that habit with the addiction. I mean, I was addicted to crack cocaine. So to be able to walk away from years and years of being addicted to crack cocaine, to be able to do that, to walk away from that, methamphetamines, to walk away from that and be, to be completely a self-love activist. Like Susan said, I'm qualified. This is the thing. If you're not going to do it in this lifetime, and if you're going to stay with your addiction and you're going to play that out, you're going to not heal that addiction, at some point in another incarnation, in another life, you will. So it's up to you when you want to do it. That's just really where it's at. It's really that straightforward, is that you get to decide when you've had enough. And maybe, hopefully, in this lifetime, you'll join us in the new earth, because we have a lot of work to do over here. We have all kinds of things that we're building and creating. Are you in tears?
I am. I feel the energy of it. I feel the energy of the possibility of healing. It's so deep for people, and I feel so honored and blessed and lucky and grateful to be in this moment. For people to be hearing and experiencing from someone like you that they're worthy of love. And it is in the book. I want to show it again. The book is called Peace, the Flip Side to Anger. And chapter 6 is called The Addict, calling it, what it is.
Yeah.
And it says right there, the root cause for addiction is a lack of love for self and feeling separate from our source. We're going to get to that one, folks, in another episode. But Kornelia, I just want to say that this idea that we have the audacity to sit here in real time and say something like, you can be freed from addiction, and that there is space and room in the world for you, and that you can, that you can feel love for yourself. We've all been there in some way, shape, or form, even though, God forbid, I wouldn't try to say I've experienced that. But, we're all in this human form at this time, and we all experience these feelings. And I just want to say thank you again, Kornelia, for, this honest conversation today. And I feel that there will be people who will hear and resonate, and there will be healing. So thank you, Kornelia.
I just want to, again, you're being so vulnerable and so open and so in your shine. You are being in your shine. This is because you're not being ashamed of your tears. You're not being ashamed of, you're not putting on a facade. You're certainly not being the imposter, because the imposter would have not showed the tears, would have not showed your vulnerability, would have not been sitting here with your open heart, that what you're feeling, the tears and what you're feeling. You wouldn't have done that. So I want to thank you also for being so open and so willing to, show yourself like this to the world. I thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I think, well, what I'd like to do, at the end of this series, when we're done with the core wounds that are listed, but certainly have an episode or two on addiction and the opposite. I think,
yes,
I think that would be a good idea to do, is that we talk about the addiction piece, because there's definitely, like I have a lot of things I want to say about it right now. You brought it up towards the end of this program here, but I have a lot of things I want to say, because, when we're so deep in addiction, when do we choose our way out? there's so much to say about it.
So, friends and listeners, this is Behind the Scenes with Susan and Kornelia. Here are my notes from our podcast, plan. And so I just added it at the bottom, Kornelia. So we have captured and codified that, and that will happen as well. So we've come to the end of this precious episode. Friends, stick with us next time. We're going to be talking about the core wound of victim. And so, Kornelia, thank you as always, and we'll see you next time around.